The 3DS is one of the many Nintendo rectangles that games can be played on. I've never used one before, and I've heard plenty of wonderful things about Power Rangers Megaforce, so why not start with that? You can't have a first-time console escapade without riding the Huffy into a gunk-ass, running to the side, pounding on enemies fiesta in the most mindless fashion possible, right? It's an unwritten rule from what I understand. We must select from our cookie-cutter colored figurine to then waltz into the oddly choppy lands. Seriously, the streets have seen better animation fluidity on the original DS even, regardless if you found the game in the darkest depths of a dump. Take Thundercats, for example. This game is like getting uppercutted in the jaw, introducing the bottom to the top, making your head crunch against the pavement. It really can put you into a death-adjacent sleeping status. But at least everything looks solid graphically, and the animations are smooth. So not only is that an immediate predicament you're plopped into when it comes to Megaforce, you'll also quickly realize the attacks themselves are partially delayed. Now, I'm not fully sure if this specific iteration of Power Rangers have bowls of SpaghettiOs A to Z's for brains, and they need to open up their shit, forced to make the words out on a table to comprehend thoughts, or what the exact issue is here. All I can say is Megaforce is not doing them justice. They come off as if you opened a pack of super warriors, and when you try to bend their leg, it snaps off. Once again, Shrek is a more powerful, heroic figure than the ones who are labeled as such. I still wait for this to change. With the choppiness out of the way, that just leaves the core gameplay, which is not much better. No matter the enemy you face, losing is not a possibility. Even the Megazord battles are similar to what your brain feels like shortly after huffing a can of paint. You can slice up the opposing tin cans and crush them underneath your building-sized light-up Skechers shoe with ease. Then hit them with a finish 'em because finish him is copyrighted. Needless to say, Megaforce is not the most enthralling time a player could have purchased for $39.99, but the bland gameplay is not necessarily the worst part. I'd say the main offender, aside from the fact levels repeatedly get recycled, cause coming up with new locations outside of a city, street, factory, or jungle is simply not a possibility, is how your fellow Power Rangers never close the trap. Every 2 to 3 seconds, the circus is always telling you about random hogwash. It never ends.
I bet we can break this.
Wow, good job. Wow, good job.
I bet that switch will move it. I bet we can break this.
I don't know who came up with this idea. I just want to know why. Did they believe the people playing would be deeply immersed, like the Power Rangers are sitting right next to them, barking orders down their throat, repeatedly making the most astute observations in history? I don't get it. The only way to keep yourself sane is to shut the sound off so you don't need to listen to it anymore. And to make matters worse, there's actually a second one of these things on the 3DS. The other is called Power Rangers Super Megaforce. That is essentially the same style of game where you're running around pounding on thugs with characters that shockingly have differing statistics this time around, while also having plenty of unlockables. The only real issue with Super Megaforce is just how there's hardly any enemies to rumble against. Each stage I played only had around 10 enemies, and it's a choice I will never understand. The whole enjoyment factor of playing beat-em-up games comes from delivering one-way hospital tickets to groups of poor souls. And your idea with this one is to have players pound on an 8-piece nugget, then move on to the next level. What is the thought process with that? Why were the Power Rangers fanatics not able to feast during this time period? 2 games were brewed in the cauldron for 3DS, and both poisoned citizens everywhere. It's truly a miracle Power Rangers Ninja Storm on Game Boy Advance couldn't be topped by 2 supposed demons on futuristic hardware. Surely players gave up with these quite quickly to do something more productive with their time, like learning more about our roots as humans, using Combat of Giants Dinosaurs 3D as their catalyst. This game gave me the choice between a hunter, a defender, a charger, or a predator for my journey. I decided to go with predator just to see how that worryingly increasing mindset functions. I picked my dino, named him Jake Conway, way in hopes of ensuring he is able to dominate fellow wildlife with ease, which was the best move I've ever made in my life, apparently. When my big dino gets into battles with other creatures, they discover my monstrosity is a prehistoric version of a modern-day god. Anytime they attack, they glow red, so I always know when the strikes will come my way. Constructing this supreme gameplay loop only rivaled by underworld gems found during the cataclysmic events these beasts will inevitably endure. You sit there waiting, you jiggy to the side, land a flurry of moves, then repeat this mythological technique to win, 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 never lose. Combat of Giants' entire loop, put simply, is remembering patterns that are outright told to you. Does that not, suplex the fun right into a trash compactor? If you're summoning a game where this is the only piece of gameplay, why would you not put the knowledge fully in the player's hands to learn? That's the formula that made a title like Michael Tyson's Punch-Out be one people clean their pipes out to all these years later. They enjoy learning the timings and figuring it out on their own. Was the studio under the impression the inclusion of these overworld strolls is that amazing to where players would gladly look over this blunder, foaming at the mouth, wanting to indulge themselves into straight pathways filled with pixelated shadows and trees? There's no way gameplay this shallow could hold anyone over. You're given one singular way to defeat an enemy that's told to you for each level. You repeat it 4 to 5 times, then scrap against a boss, moving on to the next with the overarching goal of trying to become the champion of these lands. For me, I had to fight a motherfucker named Albert to get the crown on my head. This undoubtedly has to be the laziest possible way to bring one of these sorts of games into the world. Disregarding how you have your Johnson held the entire time you play, you guys couldn't at least make the other gangs go against different dinosaurs? It doesn't matter if you're a predator, chaser, whatever, it's the same sludge you did a swan dive into with Jake. With how brain dead this is, I don't want to do it again. Losing isn't gonna happen unless you aren't paying attention. It's true entertainment in the gaming space that needs a name in honor of Jake Conway. It will be named Jake's Law. When your character is so fucking dominant, given all the eggs in the Easter basket, every existing ethereal force is backing you up at each moment, losing isn't real, that's Jake's Law. A law that is more than prevalent in Combat of Giants, but not contained in Tenkai Knight's Brave Battle. Mainly because it has a control scheme ripped from the catacombs of Action 52. Whenever you're attempting to ascend to another platform, you need to press the directional button shortly before you press the jump button, otherwise your resilient figure jumps straight up. It feels horrible. And considering how direct what you are eating is, how you have the movement feel this rancid is questionable to say the least. I guess it shouldn't be too surprising though. I had the scent of a rotting carcass travel up my nostril when I got my first view of the level. I'm not positive if Tenkai Knights was trying to be similar to Power Rangers or what the goal was, but you choose from 4 Rower Pangers that each wield a unique weapon and have a sort of special attack. None of them are much more visually interesting or impactful than just pressing B to whack enemies to death with your styrofoam toy, which summarizes the entire game, honestly. That's all you do. You spawn into what seems to be the same few arenas to hack away at enemies, having no progression and no depth. Each stage gives an allotted amount to destroy, presumably hoping you feel as if you're a superhuman wasp buzzing around the skies after a fist smashed your hive while you sear them up on your grill. But I can say for certain it didn't come off that way. The only things I felt was either the feeling to pop my eyes out of my skull to keep myself awake, or irritation. It's no exaggeration how horrific traversing around an arena is. Even a maneuver as simple as jumping in the air to hit an enemy can be similar to swimming into a tsunami. What a marvel it is to witness a game that has one singular task for the player to accomplish, and it needs to be as grueling as possible for reasons outside of genuine challenge created by the game. How else could players wolf down more and more Tenkai Knights if they weren't having pins inserted into their ears, nose, and mouth simultaneously with each step taken, right? Then to top off the legendary undiscovered bacteria-filled cookie jar, in between levels, you need to sit through unreasonably long, unskippable cutscenes. And look, I'm all for these crackheads sharing their war stories about how they're purchasing underwear online to aid in slowly building their panty-sniffing hobby like a Lego castle, but this is seriously ridiculous. I spent more time watching text scroll, spamming A, than I did playing the game. It just wasn't worth it anymore. I needed to bathe in real mechanical mayhem, which is exactly what Transformers Dark of the Moon is going to do for me, or I hoped it would. Instead of this being a game where you're controlling the beloved automobiles in their humanoid form, we're only given their car form to drive around in, with the ability to swap to stealth mode that is basically a combat mode, not making much sense to me, because one, the first thing the streets think of when the word Transformers is spoken would be the massive behemoth troopers stomping around. But also, from a gameplay perspective, what is the reason to have us start off in a mode that might as well be useless since you aren't able to attack in it? All you can do is peel around the environment, grabbing items, or occasionally doing an objective. To make this even more of a chore, the stealth mode has a timer that reverts you back to the regular car mode after it's depleted, forcing you to go around looking for pickups to refill the bar. I just don't understand why the player isn't always in combat form. The situation is an inconvenience more than anything else. Was it a way to pretend the gameplay depth is deeper than a piss puddle? If so, the tactic didn't work. I kinda assumed when you're at the drawing board with a plethora of enticing looking characters, creativity could ooze from your bottomless pit skull, concocting interesting special weapons for them all to have, or maybe add a diverse treasure chest of weaponry for the player to use during battle. Well, we don't get that. All we deserve is machine guns and a missile attack reskinned between each character to shoot at the same groupings of enemy vehicles. I love how literal children playing with dollar store straight off the sweatshop factory conveyor belt toy cars were coming up with more expansive arsenals in make-pretend war zones. What I find funny though is that even if intricate designs happen to be implemented into this relic, the overall enjoyment factor still wouldn't be any higher. Keeping in line with multiple games I've played today, it took me around an hour to finally see a new arena that wasn't being recycled, so from the visual front, you're getting railed from multiple angles by repetition, along with the core objectives following suit, fully finishing the paste eater pie due to them hardly ever changing. A majority of the stages I played slammed Optimus Prime into an arena to shoot the same few enemies on end for 5 real-life minutes straight, with some feeling as if you're getting a first-hand experience of going face-first through a wood chipper. The choppy lag you are expected to suffer through in larger open areas is a hefty ask if you take into account how tedious Transformers becomes after 5 minutes. I don't see what person would willingly want to exercise their mind by wallowing in what could be the most pathetic car combat video game of all time. It couldn't be me. I'd happily drill dash myself into oncoming traffic before that happens, as long as the automobile is driven by Hello Kitty, where thankfully Hello Kitty 3D racing can make that wish partially come true. Now, I don't believe a single person had an inkling of a thought they'd be Godzilla rail flipping into excellence with this one, but it still leaves them with a pod of greed, draw 2 questions, pondering if there is another kart racer in the history of vehicles that has ever been as grimy as this, that's not in the 4 Horsemen tier. From what I've played, my eyes have never been blessed with one. Hello Kitty 3D racing genuinely looks unfinished, no matter if you're on land, sea, or air. The tracks, characters, and everything surrounding looks like they're shaped from cookie dough, with the gameplay, of course, not leaving that sphere. I thought we learned back in the 1920s that it's kinda imperative for kart racers to let the player drift. Including it would help create that drug-induced feeling when circling the few tracks you're given, which is only 7 or 8, by the way. Each track is the most lifeless bent circle with no deviation. There isn't even a single ramp found during the entire game. You just loop-de-loop in purgatory. So what you need to do to keep your interest is gauge gaze at a few of the embodiment of greatness backgrounds we're given. My favorite was the one that had a weirdly blurry Hello Kitty Titanic, and how could I forget the entirety of the "Please don't file a lawsuit on us" Rainbow Road with a bit of moon sand sprinkled on it. These monumental pieces are sadly the only thing that your brain will gravitate towards while playing, since there is not a lick of dopamine coming from anywhere else. The singular piece of variation you get during gameplay is that you can ride boats and soar through the skies in planes alongside the traditional Formula 1 action, neither feeling like a true joyride where we can watch our favorite characters smoking crack, experiencing the time of their lives. Everyone is just depressed, clocking into their 9 to 5, showing up with the bare minimum. People play the computer games to escape reality, not be reminded of it. That's what this game is, really. When you turn it on, you feel like you clocked into a job that can't afford a studio apartment in a location where you'll get shot at if you walked outside after 5 p.m. I cannot stress how sad this all is. These guys couldn't even spell balloon right, or let alone get the icons of vehicles' colors correct. Here, it says my plane will be pink, but in reality, it has a McDonald's sponsorship. I don't know what was going on in the circus tent with this one, but apparently it was sold for $29.99 when it released, which makes me sick to think about. You could buy 3 copies of the Ride to Hell Retribution DLC for that price, or invest it into Mario Kart 7, maybe even a Garfield kart that I recently learned was ported onto 3DS. And with that one, as I said in a previous video, Garfield kart is an unripe banana of a racing game. With all the jokes and memes aside, it's not good, and incredibly dated for the time period it released in. But it's still better than Hello Kitty 3D racing. I truly believe it is the reverse King Arthur of the kart racing kingdom. It's a depressing situation that would make you want to unwind by digging up Stone Age classics contained in Arcade Classics 3D. And with a title like that, there's no way this can't be fun. This must have everyone's favorite gemstones, like Dudes with Attitude or Ninja Baseball Batman. No, it doesn't. We got Bounce and Break, that some eagle-eyed onlookers may know as Breakout, that kept crashing whenever I finished the first level. Blocks, that's a completely original game. Fucking Jewels, that is just Bejeweled. Impact, a game that has you going against purple Doritos in a space museum. Pop It is Vertical Zuma, and Swap is Columns. I always wonder while playing these things, what it would be like if these crooks had AI at their disposal. Would we have gotten this as a cover art? These compilation style games are a staple in the lower echelon of this business, with some reaching absolutely ridiculous numbers, like 3D Game Collection 55 in 1, a behemoth of a cartridge getting the second place trophy for the most games I've ever seen crammed into one release, and I doubt anyone needs to be told that none of them are making players frolic through Candyland. This magnificent cartridge allows gamers to feast on premium lard, having them do stuff like puzzles after the pieces are dumped directly onto the canvas they're expecting you to make a puzzle on. You get to play Sudoku that lets you spam guess numbers with no punishment, so the player is not forced to put the key in their ear to rev the engine upstairs, with the best moment of the whole entire thing being when you discover shortly into the raid that the 55 in the 55 in 1 is a lie because they reskinned a large portion of the games to inflate the total number. It's depressing I didn't expect this technique to be executed. Upon learning this, I actually had to check if Phoenix or Blast had anything to do with it, but they surprisingly didn't. We have Purple Hills to praise for bestowing glory of this magnitude onto us. Thank you for your hours and hours and hours of backbreaking work and sleepless nights to sell peasants an assortment of juvenile, shallow games that all have the value of logic at a political radicals gathering. There's no way I'd be able to see myself rolling into the schoolyard as a young sailor trying to flex the 55 in 1 unless I truly felt like having my skull caved in and my whole inventory robbed. It's a situation that leaves you with only one option. You gotta see if an age-old franchise of the world's greatest blue fucks can beat this out. I wasn't fully sure what to expect from a Smurfs video game game. As I was reading the legend about the Smurfs village being destroyed and how they need to rebuild it, my assumption is that it was gonna be a platformer or something, but my guess was miles off. It's a skin and bone ass minigame compilation. The first one served to me on a silver platter was playing Fruit Ninja with wooden planks, slashing the pieces as they fly in, gathering materials to construct a home. After I collected my pieces, I tapped on an icon to build the house, then oh no, we ran out of wood. Now I need to go scrounge some up from a local forest by tapping dots on a tree to continue playing Fruit Ninja, slowly rebuilding the empire. And in case you forget how complex these deciphering an ancient language not known in modern society level of challenge minigames are, you can have the instructions reread to you every time you play. I'm good, thanks. Smurfs in its entirety is essentially just you farming various materials with hardly any interactability. 99% of your playtime is tapping dots, dragging your stylus to chop wood, or move a minecart to catch rocks. The only adversities you are faced with is when the stone placing minigame, for example, decides to toss in a rusty wrench by having you tap on dots before you put the rocks down. It never gets any more complicated than that. Even back during this era, I've seen free-to-play games on phones that had more intuitive gameplay, yet they decided to stick this on 3DS with a price tag of $40 at release, which is preposterous when it's at the level of quality of sewage found in the eShop, what is now a tomb filled with mounds of dead carcasses. It's a shame the 3DS eShop shut down in 2023. Sifting through the dump is not a possibility anymore, sadly, so the kingdom can no longer easily cocoon themselves into Cube Creator 3D. That is unsurprisingly, with that name, attempting to emulate Minecraft in a much more rotten manner, obviously. Primarily due to the progression being the speed of a motorboat on land. Actually, zero caves spawn in the overworld from what I saw. A real mind bender, if I say so myself. Since the world in totality is pathetically small, the only way of getting higher tiers of ore is landscaping random patches of grass, hoping to find a cave underground to work your way up the food chain. It took me around 15 minutes to find my first cave. Playing Cube Creator 3D really makes you wish you were just playing the real game rather than one that's created by a hoodlum doing his best to pretend you're playing Minecraft. Out of curiosity, I gave Minecraft 3DS Edition a spin to compare, and while it's not the best 5-course meal gamers will remember for eons, a person could sit down and play this unironically. But Cube Creator 3D? I think I'm alright. What's really sad though is that Cube Collector would be considered one of the better eShop titles you would have been able to download. I mean, look at Operation Cobra. You pick from 3 whole action-filled maps to mow down groups of sentient Lego zombies with an MP5 that could kill someone in real life if they aim down and shoot it thanks to the muzzle flash, all while hoping the zombies don't suck you in with their black hole fingers. You get 300 bullets to do so, and that's it. Once you run out, there's nothing you can do aside from hand the Swiffer Sweeper over to your opposition. I'm guessing the Pope of Gaming here must have forgot to include ammo pickups. I don't know what happened. All I know is that it was a very shitty move on their end. I wanted to grind days of my life on this, but now I can't due to this blunder. I needed my 15 seconds and I've seen everything video game, which does seem to be the rule of the eShop. You could purchase a title like Bear Shark for $4 whole with the only piece of gameplay your eyes see and your brain has traveled through its tubes is tapping jump on the bottom screen. How could a person have the audacity to sell this for real money? I guess the monitoring of quality didn't exist on the eShop. Nobody cared. If they did, Fatal Fracture wouldn't exist, where you're shooting oversized acetaminophen tablets at paper cutouts inside of a pizza box. This released in 2020. The simple fact of how mundane these games are is why I was trying to only surf the official releases on 3DS, since I hoped there would be more meat. Plus, the 3DS eShop doesn't exist anymore, so I literally couldn't explore it. But with those official releases, there weirdly isn't many interestingly objective, horrific titles from my discoveries. A lot of the time, I was led to believe a game was worthless, and it just wasn't. Asphalt 3D is a prime example. From what what I was told or read online, it was claimed from the people it's one of the worst games on the console, and I just don't see the vision. You aren't playing sea trash washed up on the shore. Yeah, it's not Gran Turismo and Need for Speed baked into one, having gamers turning a 2012 GameStop into a war zone, trying to decapitate other customers with a replica energy sword to get their hands on a copy, but it's a reasonable racing title for an on-the-go console, only suffering from minimal functionality issues. The problems are more with the core idea of taking a phone game you could get for $2.99 and selling it for $39.99. From that perspective, Asphalt 3D is not very great. If you're only looking at it from the core game though, it's just mediocre. Another example I saw flying off the frying pan is Roller Coaster Tycoon 3D. That was also claimed to be disgusting, which is partially true. Having a real big boss Roller Coaster Tycoon is a tough ask for a 3DS. So it of course suffers from technical limitations with how expansive your parks can be, and especially with the overall progression, but I can't say it would be one of the worst games you could possibly play. I had a reasonable enough time with it. All I did was follow my GTA Online Infinite Money Glitch tutorial to help me create the most exciting roller coaster this galaxy has ever seen. As a game in totality, Roller Coaster Tycoon 3D is definitely worse than the original, but again, it's sort of expected and there isn't much to say about it. I kept scooping up games like this. I'm not finding the grandiose quests like the original DS had. Where are the Supermans that were an endless train wreck? Everything seems to be an instant death car accident here. What human could monologue about Real Heroes Firefighter 3D? You walk through levels suffering from constant frame drops that had to have been intentional. You know, firefighters struggle to exist when they're storming buildings to extinguish flames, so if the player has a hard time moving around, it would help fully simulate a firefighter's life. What a 15-dimensional Connect 4 move. Although, I'm sure these unsung heroes don't need to deal with their tools vanishing to never return. I'm supposed to be holding the ultimate super soaker here, but my character is fondling the air instead. It kept happening to me, making my compelling gameplay loop of standing in place, holding a button down, to move somewhere else, to continue holding a button down, impossible. I had to keep restarting, redoing the first part of the game each time it went down. Maybe it's supposed to give players a view of hell, sticking them inside of a flaming building, getting fucked with repeatedly. Who knows? With that said, this plight is starting to have me believe the 3DS might actually be the greatest console ever made, since finding expansive stinkers that are objective, worthless goop is a real challenge outside of the eShop. Unless I somehow overlooked the underworld cartridges that would make a person be envious of soldiers scraping up the insides of a septic tank, the first 3DS mountain climb was not as exhilarating as I hoped it would be. But if you have any suggestions for 3DS titles that you are aware of that do fit that bill, please share them down in the comments. Big ups to all of our channel members who go above and beyond each and every month, generously supporting a channel even further. If you would like to join them and get early access to content, make sure to hit the join button right next to the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, take very good care of yourselves, and I hope to see you all again in the next video.